I realized something was wrong the moment his mother set the dessert in front of everyone at the table except me. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't skip me on purpose, at least not consciously. She simply paused, looked at my hands, still holding a dish towel from helping clear the dinner plates, and moved on. A small thing, the kind of thing you could talk yourself out of noticing. But I noticed. That moment came later, though. Before that, there was the drive out. Before that, there was the question Ryan had asked me in the parking lot of our apartment building. Half nervous, half hopeful. "They're going to love you," he said, adjusting my collar like I was heading into something important. I smiled. He didn't know I was already running a quiet experiment. Ryan had never asked me exactly what I did at the hospital. Not in the specific way that would have required a specific answer. He knew I worked long hours. He knew I came home tired in a way that lived behind my eyes. He knew I had paged out of 2 of our dinner reservations and once left his birthday party at 11 because a patient had gone into acute distress. He called me dedicated. His friends called me unavailable. No one called me by my actual title. I am the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Mercy General. I have been since I was 31, which made me the youngest person to hold that position in the hospital's history and one of the few women to hold it at all. I lead a team of 14 surgeons. I have performed over 2,000 open-heart procedures. I have testified before a state medical board. I have been asked to consult on cases in 4 other states. Ryan thought I was a cardiologist. It wasn't a lie I constructed deliberately. On our first date, I told him I worked in cardiac care. He nodded the way people nod when they understand just enough to move the conversation forward. He never asked which part. He never asked how many people reported to me, or what it meant when my phone rang at 3 in the morning and I answered before the second ring. He just accepted what I offered. And what I offered, for a long time, felt like enough. We met at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning I wasn't supposed to have off. A surgery had been postponed. I had 2 free hours and nowhere particular to be, which almost never happened. I was standing in front of a display of heirloom tomatoes, trying to remember the last time I had cooked a real meal when he appeared next to me and asked if I knew the difference between a Cherokee Purple and a Brandywine. I didn't. He did. We talked for 40 minutes, then another hour over coffee at a table outside. He was a civil engineer. He built bridges, literally, the kind people drove over every day without thinking about. I liked that. Something visible. Something that stayed. By the time he knew my last name, I was already someone he was comfortable with. That comfort felt rare enough to protect. In medicine, especially at my level, your title enters the room before you do. People change around it. Some become formal. Some become competitive. Some want something from you. Very few just look at you like you're a person who might enjoy heirloom tomatoes on a free Saturday morning. Ryan looked at me like that. I wasn't willing to give it up too quickly. A year passed. Then another. I kept waiting for the right moment, and the right moment kept not arriving. When he asked me to meet his parents, I said yes without hesitation. I want to know them, I told him. That was true. What I didn't say was that I also wanted to know something else. I wanted to see who they were before they knew who I was. His parents lived in a town about 90 miles from the city. The kind of town where the hardware store had been owned by the same family for 3 generations, and everybody at the diner knew your coffee order. His father had worked in manufacturing for 30 years before retiring. His mother taught elementary school until her knees gave out. They had raised Ryan and his younger sister in a 2-story house on a quiet street, and from everything Ryan had told me, they were proud people, decent people, people who believed you were what you earned and what you earned should be visible. We pulled into the driveway on a Sunday afternoon in October. The yard was neat, the kind of neat that takes consistent effort. A small pumpkin sat on the front step. Wind chimes moved lazily near the door. His mother opened it before we reached the porch. She was warm, genuinely warm, not the performed kind. She hugged Ryan first, then me, and said she was so glad I could make the drive. His father stood in the hallway behind her, a tall man with a careful handshake and careful eyes. "So, you work at the hospital in the city?" he said. "Yes, sir," I replied. He nodded once. "Good field, steady work." Inside the house smelled like pot roast and something with cinnamon. Family photos climbed the staircase wall. Ryan at various ages. His sister in a graduation gown. A posed portrait with everyone in matching blue shirts, the kind families take when they've decided to document a moment. There were no photos of me. There wouldn't be. Not yet. We settled in the living room. His mother brought out a cheese plate and asked about the drive. His father asked Ryan about a project he was working on, a pedestrian overpass near downtown. Ryan explained it with the enthusiasm he always had for his work, the kind of enthusiasm that made you feel the thing he was describing was important. His father listened carefully and asked follow-up questions. I watched. Then his mother turned to me. "And what do you do exactly at the hospital, sweetheart?" I had answered this question many times in many ways. I had versions of it for cocktail parties, for airplanes, for parents like these who were trying to understand where I fit in their picture of the world. "I work in cardiac surgery," I said. "Oh," she smiled. "Like assisting? Prep work?" "Something like that," I said. That was the moment I felt the room settle around an assumption. Not a hostile assumption, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't announce itself. His father leaned back in his chair. "Long hours in hospitals," he said, not unkindly. "Ryan says you're always working." He said it the way people do when they're handing you a compliment that's mostly sympathy. "It can be demanding," I said. "Have you thought about something more manageable?" his mother asked. "Once you're settled?" I understood what she meant by settled. The same thing she meant every time she looked at my left hand. "I'm pretty settled where I am," I said and smiled. She smiled back, but her eyes had already moved to Ryan. "He works so hard, too," she said, almost to herself. "It'll be nice when you both can slow down." Dinner was served at a long table with placemats in a burnt orange color that matched the season. His father sat at the head, his mother sat opposite. Ryan sat to my left. Across from me was an empty chair his father explained was for his sister, who was running late. The conversation moved naturally across the table. His father talked about a neighbor who had sold his property to a developer. His mother talked about a former student who had done well for herself opening a bakery in town. Both were stories about people who had made something tangible, something you could point to. At some point, his father said, to no one in particular, "You know what I always tell Ryan? A man needs work that builds something. You need to be able to see it at the end of the day." Ryan nodded. I listened. His mother passed the bread basket around the table. When she got to me, she also passed me the serving spoon for the potatoes. "Would you mind, dear?" She was already turning back to say something to Ryan. I took the spoon and served the potatoes. I want to be honest about what that moment felt like. It didn't feel like cruelty. It felt like someone who had already decided where I belonged at the table, and that place was somewhere between guest and help. She wasn't being mean. She was being exactly who she was when she thought no one important was watching. His sister arrived midway through dinner. A bright-eyed woman about 5 years younger than Ryan who apologized for being late and kissed everyone on the cheek. When she got to me, she said, "Oh, you're even prettier than your photo." Ryan's been nervous about this for weeks. Then she sat down and started loading her plate like she had earned it, which I immediately liked about her. The conversation turned to the future. His father asked Ryan about timelines. His mother asked if we had thought about where we might settle down. The implication in both questions was that settling down meant moving closer to this town, to this table, to this life that was already built. "We haven't nailed everything down yet," Ryan said carefully. His father looked at me. "You'd have more flexibility if you were in a support role," he said. "Some of those nurses work 4 days a week. Better for a family." I took a slow breath. "I'm not a nurse," I said. He nodded, unbothered. "Whatever the title is. The point is the flexibility." He said it pleasantly. The way someone does when they're certain they're helping. Ryan's sister glanced at me. Something in her eyes shifted slightly, like she had caught something the rest of the table had missed. After dinner, his mother suggested we sit in the living room while she made coffee. I stood to help clear the plates. She waved me off. "No, you're a guest." Then she handed me the leftover bread to put away and pointed to the third cabinet on the left. I put the bread away. Ryan's sister appeared beside me in the kitchen while his parents were occupied near the coffee maker. "So?" she said quietly, pulling out her phone. "What do you actually do?" She said it like a question she had been holding for a while. "I'm a surgeon," I said. She looked at me, like, "A surgeon? Cardiothoracic," I said. "Open heart." She stared at me for a moment. "And they think you're something in cardiac care," I said. which is technically true. She made a sound that was almost a laugh, but not quite. "Oh, this is going to be interesting," she said, and went back to the living room. The interesting part arrived about 20 minutes later. His father had been asking Ryan about a mutual family friend, a man named Gerald who had apparently built a successful plumbing company from nothing. The conversation circled back, as it always seemed to in this house, to the idea of visible accomplishment. "That's what I respect," his father said. "You start with nothing and you build it. Every tile, every pipe. You can see what you made." He looked at me then, not unkindly. "You plan to stay in the hospital long term?" "Yes," I said. "I plan to stay in my position indefinitely." "What's your position exactly?" he asked. I set my coffee cup down. "I'm the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Mercy General." The room did not go loud. It went the other direction. His father's expression did not change immediately. He processed the words the way people do when they hear something that requires rearranging what they thought they knew. His mother set down her cup. Ryan turned to look at me slowly. His face was something I had not seen before. Not anger, not pride. Something between the two that had not settled into either yet. "You're the chief," his father said. Not a question, a repetition. "Yes," I said. He cleared his throat. "Of the whole department?" "Yes." He looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at me. His sister, from the armchair in the corner, was very carefully studying the middle distance. "How many surgeons do you oversee?" his father asked. 14, I said. No one spoke. Then his father stood up. Slowly, with the kind of deliberateness that meant his body was buying his mind time to catch up. He walked to the bookshelf, picked up a small framed photo, set it back down. Then he turned around. "Well," he said. That was all. Just the word, floating by itself in the middle of the room. "How long?" his mother asked, finally. Her voice was different, quieter. "I've been chief for 3 years," I said. "I've been at Mercy General for 6. She nodded slowly. Then she stood up and brought more coffee, even though no one had asked for it. She filled my cup first. Ryan spoke after a long pause. "You never told me," he said. Quietly, not accusing, honestly confused. "You never asked," I said. "It was not a defense. It was just true. I asked what you did, and I told you I worked in cardiac care." He looked at the table. "That's not the same thing." "No," I agreed. "It's not." The atmosphere had shifted, not into anger, not into argument, into something more uncomfortable than either of those, into a kind of careful, recalibrated attention. His father sat back down and asked me how I had gotten into cardiothoracic, specifically, the words, "deliberate now," precise, where before everything had been general and easy. His mother offered me a blanket because the room was drafty. She had not offered me anything earlier. Ryan barely spoke for the rest of the evening. He sat close to me but slightly turned, like a person trying to solve something by looking at it from a new angle. When we finally said goodnight, his mother hugged me for longer than she had when I arrived. "You'll come back soon," she said. "We'd love to know you better." I told her I'd like that. I meant it. I also knew that the invitation was different now. It came with awareness it hadn't had before. In the car, Ryan didn't start the engine right away. "I don't know what I'm feeling," he said. "That makes 2 of us," I said. He sat with his hands on the wheel. The dashboard lights made his face look unfamiliar. "Are you angry at me?" he asked. "No." "Are you angry at them?" I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. "I'm paying attention." He looked over at me. "To what?" "To how people behave when they think they already know who you are." He was quiet for a long time after that. The highway unreeled in front of us, flat and dark. I watched the mile markers pass and thought about the serving spoon, about the bread cabinet, about the word nurse offered to me so easily, so confidently, as if the only question worth asking was which version of invisible I preferred. The next morning he left early for a site visit. He kissed my forehead at the door, then stood there a moment longer than usual, like he was trying to think of the right thing to say and had come up empty. I sat at the kitchen table with coffee in the quiet of the apartment. My phone showed a text from my chief resident about a patient whose post-op numbers were trending in the right direction. I replied quickly, then I sat back and let the weekend settle. There was a word for what I had witnessed at that dinner table. Not cruelty, because there hadn't been any. Not rudeness, because they had been technically polite throughout. The word was indifference. The particular kind that doesn't feel like a choice, because it's never had to be one. They hadn't been unkind to me. They had simply not bothered to be curious, and that told me something I hadn't known how to learn any other way. His mother called 2 days later. Not Ryan. His mother, directly. She used my name the whole call. Not sweetheart. Not dear. She said she had been thinking about our conversation, and would I be willing to come back the following Sunday? She wanted to make something I might enjoy. She asked what I liked to eat. I told her and said yes. The second Sunday was different in tone, but not entirely different in substance. She had made a lamb roast. She used the good plates. His father pulled out my chair when I arrived and said he was glad I'd come back. These were not small things. They were also not the same as what had been missing the first time. Conversation over lunch moved toward my career with a kind of polished interest that hadn't existed before. His father asked about surgical training, how long it took, what the path looked like. His mother asked if I ever got nervous before a procedure. They listened carefully when I answered. They leaned forward slightly. They asked follow-up questions. I answered them honestly. But I noticed something that afternoon that stayed with me for a long time afterward. They were engaging with the version of me they had just discovered. Not with me. There was a difference between the two, and it was the size of everything. Ryan and I drove back in silence that was different from the first week's silence. Less confused, more deliberate. They tried, he said, somewhere around mile 40. They did, I said. That's something. It is, I agreed. It's also not the same as what I wanted. He glanced at me. What did you want? I had been thinking about how to answer that question since the previous Sunday. I wanted them to be curious about me when they thought I was nobody, I said, not because of what I could offer, but because I was sitting at their table. He was quiet. That's not something you can go back and have, I said. You can only notice it was missing. He nodded slowly. His jaw was tight. He was processing something he didn't have the language for yet. I had learned to wait when people were in that particular kind of silence. The invitations kept coming after that. Events, dinners, a church fundraiser where his mother mentioned, more than once, that people would be so inspired to hear about my work. His father forwarded me articles about cardiothoracic advances and called them things like impressive and remarkable. They were trying to close the distance the dinner table had opened. I believed that. I also believed that effort and intention are not the same as insight. One evening, Ryan asked me something he had clearly been working up to for several days. My dad called me, he said. We were doing ordinary things, washing dishes side by side, the kind of task that makes difficult conversations easier because you have somewhere to look. What did he say? Ryan handed me a bowl to dry. He asked if he had done something wrong. He paused. I told him I wasn't sure. He said he thought the problem was that he had treated you like just another girlfriend before he knew what you'd accomplished. I set the bowl down. And what did you say? I said the problem was that he treated you like just another girlfriend before he knew what you'd accomplished. He looked at me. Same sentence. Different problem. Something shifted between us in that moment. A small click of understanding, the kind that doesn't make noise but changes everything that comes after it. The problem isn't how they treated me when they knew, I said. It's who they were when they didn't. He turned off the faucet. I know, he said quietly. I was there too, and that was the thing I had been waiting to hear him say. Not about his parents, about himself. He had been there. He had laughed politely at the dinner table when his father called my career steady work. He had not corrected his mother when she asked about flexibility as though I were a part-time filing clerk. He had not said a word when I stood up to pass the bread and received a dish towel in return. He had grown up in that room and silence was a language he spoke fluently there, and I had understood that. I had, but understanding something and living inside it were different things. I didn't know what to say, he said. I grew up with them. You don't push back. I know, I said. I'm not asking you to have fought for me. Then what are you asking? I thought about it. I'm asking you to understand what it cost me to sit there quietly. He leaned against the counter. Outside, the city made its ordinary sounds. Somewhere below us, a dog barked twice and went silent. I think I understand now, he said. I think you're starting to, I said. It wasn't a criticism. It was the most honest thing I could offer. We didn't break up that night. We didn't fix anything either. We stood in the kitchen and chose honesty over resolution, which is harder than it sounds and more important than most people realize. The next week I asked Ryan to come to the hospital. Not for a tour, not to impress anyone. I took him to the cafeteria at 7:30 in the morning when the day shift was trading notes with the night shift, and residents were eating on their feet, and the whole place had that particular exhausted, wired energy that hospitals have before the world wakes up. I introduced him to my chief resident, a young man named Davies who shook Ryan's hand and said, "She saved my career twice before I saved my first patient." I introduced him to the nurses on my floor, to the scheduling coordinator who knew every surgeon's preferences before they did, to the janitor named Phil who had worked the cardiac floor for 19 years and knew more about the rhythms of that department than any administrator. Ryan watched all of it quietly. On the drive home, he said, "I didn't understand what you were carrying." "Most people don't," I said. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I had thought about this answer for a long time. "Because I wanted you to know me before you knew what I was worth on paper," I said. "I've spent my entire career being defined by a title. You were one of the few people who wasn't doing that. I wasn't ready to give that up." He stared at the road. "But I was defining you anyway," he said, "just in the other direction." That stopped me. Because he was right. By not knowing, he had filled in the blank with something smaller than what I was. And I had let him. We had both been working with incomplete pictures and calling it intimacy. "Yes," I said. He didn't say anything else for a while. Then, very quietly, he said, "I want to start over." "We can't start over," I said. "But we can start from here." A month later, Ryan did something I did not expect. He drove out to his parents' house alone. He did not call me before or after. I found out when his sister texted me a single line. He finally said it. I called her. She told me Ryan had sat his parents down and explained, without drama but also without softness, that they had failed a basic test of character at that dinner table, that what they had shown me was a version of themselves he wasn't proud of, that he needed them to understand the difference between respecting accomplishment and respecting a person. His father had gotten quiet. His mother had cried a little. His sister had apparently been in the kitchen pretending not to listen the whole time. Ryan called me that evening. He sounded tired in the way people sound after they've done something they'd been avoiding. "How did it go?" I asked. "Hard," he said. "Good. Both. Did they understand?" He was quiet for a moment. "My dad said he'd been thinking about the dinner. He said he realized he never actually asked you a single question about yourself. Not one. Just assumptions." He paused. He said it out loud and then sat with it for a long time. I let that land. "That's something," I said. "Is it enough?" I thought about my answer carefully. "It's a start," I said. "What comes after is the part that matters." The third Sunday I visited, his father opened the door and said, simply, "I owe you an honest conversation." Not an apology wrapped in flattery. Not an explanation designed to make himself feel better. An admission that he had looked at me without looking. We sat at the kitchen table, just the two of us, while his mother and Ryan were somewhere in the garden, and he said, "I realized I didn't ask you a single thing about who you are. I made up a picture and sat across from it for 3 hours." "Yes," I said. "You did." He nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't explain away. He just sat with it. "That's the hardest part," I said, seeing it clearly without making excuses. "I'm trying," he said. "I know," I said, and I believed him. What I didn't know yet was how much of it would hold. That evening, Ryan and I sat in the backyard after his parents had gone inside. The sky had gone dark and soft and full. He reached over and held my hand the way he used to before the dinner, without thinking about it, without ceremony. "Do you still want this?" he asked. He meant everything. The relationship, the complicated family, the work of unlearning. "I want what we could be," I said. "I'm still deciding if we're going to get there." He nodded. He didn't ask for reassurance. That was new. Here is what I know, looking back on all of it. The dinner table was never really about my title. It was never about surgical hours or chain of command, or what the shoulder of my white coat said when I wore it. It was about something simpler and harder. It was about whether people are willing to be curious about someone before they have a reason to be. Whether kindness is a practice or a reward. Whether you offer someone a seat at your table because they're a person, or because you've decided they've earned it. I hid my title because I was tired of being treated like a position instead of a person. That part I understood. What I learned is that hiding it only delayed the question. It didn't answer it. Eventually, you have to let people show you who they are. And then you have to decide what to do with what they've shown. His parents are still learning. Some days the learning looks real. Some days it looks like performance. The difference matters, and I've gotten better at telling them apart. Ryan is learning too, which is the part that actually determines whether any of this holds. He is learning that standing beside me means something specific. It means saying something when it costs him something. It means not staying quiet because quiet is comfortable. It means understanding that love without witness isn't protection. It's absence. We are not finished. I don't say that as a warning. I say it because it is true of anyone who is trying to build something honest. Finished is easy. Honest takes longer. What I carry with me now, more than any of the dinners or conversations or moments in cars in the dark, is this. The most reliable version of someone's character is not the version they show you when they're impressed. It's the version they show you when they've decided you don't matter yet. Pay attention to that version. It will tell you more about who you're dealing with than anything they offer once they know the whole story. I walked into that house as a woman with a dish towel and a quiet observation. I left as myself. The difference between those two things is not about titles. It never was. If something in this story reminded you of your own life, of a time someone looked through you before they looked at you, I'd like to hear about it. And if you believe that how someone treats a stranger says more about them than how they treat a guest of honor, stay with us. There are more stories where this one came from.